Brother Paul Nichols, Master of Ceremony, Reverend Derek Richards, Superintendent Minister of the James Street Spicehouse Circuit, and Bishop-elect of the South Caribbean District, and Mrs. Shadi Richards, Reverend Adrian Odell, Superintendent Minister of the Bethel Circuit, Reverend Dr. Oral Thomas, Acting President of the United Theological College of the West Indies, my other colleagues in ministry and their spouses, specially invited guests, brothers and sisters in Christ, I greet you as we gather for this, the 12th Annual Sarah Ann Gill Memorial Lecture. I am very pleased this evening to be able to introduce someone that I've known for many years in the person of the Reverend Dr. Oral Thomas. In fact, I believe that we have known each other since we were teenagers. Dr. Thomas is a cricketer, Christian, Caribbean man, a theologian, a biblical scholar, a writer, a family man, and for me, a friend. In fact, both of us have sojourned for a long time. At the tender age of 17 years, Dr. Thomas was, along with 6 others who started to preach at that time, he was the youngest of the 7 of us. He would have been preaching this year for some 44 years and would have been an accredited preacher this year for 41 years. There are many things that I can say to you about those early years, but at this official forum, I don't think it would be in place. What I want to highlight is that he has always had both a love and a passion for cricket. In fact, when he was at the United Theological College of the West Indies, he was perhaps one of the few theologians who actually captained the Mona cricket team. And I'm sure that under his captaincy, they did very well. As you have seen in the brochure, he is married to Zola, and they have 2 children. And there is something that always confused me about his son, Joel, that Dr. Thomas ardent cricketer, passionate cricketer, but his son is a footballer. His son is actually became a professional footballer at one time in college. And so the cricketer produced a footballer. He has worked, as you would have seen, in the Leeward Islands district as superintendent of his home circuit, the Antigua circuit, and he is currently, as you would have heard, the acting president of the United Theological College, and as far as I gather, he is likely to be appointed in that position in the not too distant future. In fact, he was offered the position 3 years ago, and he declined the position. And I believe They have offered him the position again as president of the college, and they have not given him a choice. And as a good Methodist who go where we are sent and we are appointed, I believe that he will accept that appointment in due course. I have every confidence that as he speaks to us this evening on the topic of the struggle for social justice and religious freedom, that he will provoke our thoughts as well as to challenge us as a people. It has also been my pleasant joy to be a part of this experience for the last 12 years, and I was happy to serve. I was happy to be a part of this experience, but I'm equally happy to step off the stage and make room for others. Fundamental theological principle: there are times when we decrease so that others may increase. May God bless you, and may this be a pleasant evening for all of you. And it is my joy to introduce and to welcome my brother, my countryman, and my friend.
I'm quite confident that that left you without any doubt whatsoever that friends are really good people, aren't they? Very good people. May I just say, though, that where Dr. Edwards is confused, I am clear. Because with Joel being a footballer, playing for Antigua and all of that, my response to that is that talent has a way of skipping a generation. So hopefully his son will become a cricketer. Can I also say that Dr. Edwards mentioned that it was 40 years ago, so long, that I was the youngest of that bunch. Can I confirm that I'm still the youngest, please? Reverend Dr. Cuthbert and Ashley Edwards, Bishop of the South Caribbean District. Thank you. Reverend Derek and Shadi Richards, Superintendent Minister of the James Street Spicetown Circuit and Bishop-elect of the South Caribbean District, which gives me pause, this being my first opportunity and probably the only opportunity that I will get to offer publicly my prayers and hope for him for a fruitful and meaningful term of service, and by the same token, to pray for every blessing and grace for my friend, Reverend Dr. Edwards and Ashley, as they continue to make known the God that they know. Reverend Adrian Odell, the Superintendent Minister of the Bethel Circuit, all my other ministerial colleagues and their spouses, Madam Justice Sonia Richards, the Venerable Archdeacon Eric Lynch, the clergy from other denominations, distinguished guests, fellow Methodists and friends, good evening. With this privilege comes the responsibility to honor the confidence reposed in me by those responsible for this invitation, a confidence I hope to justify given the tradition of having distinguished scholars deliver this lecture since 2007, and thereby building up a foundation of scholarship on the life and faith in God of one whose name and sacrificial life are of such invaluable worth as to be held up as the only female national hero of Barbados for her outstanding courage against oppression and social injustice in the face of overwhelming odds. Even so, I am as excited and happy as you are to be here this evening. Out of tonight's lecture on the topic, Methodism and the Struggle for Social Justice in Barbados, the Ministry of Sarah and Gill in Perspective, I will draw a conclusion. And the conclusion is this: religion, abstracted from its lived realities, is meaningless. Religion, abstracted from its lived realities, is meaningless. This conclusion cannot be too much emphasized, as it is practice that keeps religion alive. As Theodore Roosevelt said, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Sarah Ann Gill lived in colonial times. She was born February 16, 1795, and died February 25, 1866. These were times when Africans, against their wills, were brought to the West Indies to labor on sugar plantations as slaves. While in Africa, they were socialized, they lived socialized and self-directed. They were socialized and they lived self-directed lives. But in the West Indies, they became merchandise or the sole property of plantation owners. The process of enslavement forcibly stripped them of all their human rights and sense of worth and dignity. Besides, these were times when the missionaries accepted that such a system of governance was a matter of politics, void of moral considerations. Sarah Ann Gill was colored and of mixed race, which conferred on her privileges not enjoyed by enslaved blacks. Free colored and blacks had no right to vote until 1831 in colonial societies. She was materially secure, but without civil rights. In colonial societies, complexion or skin tone had significance. In those societies, the color of one's skin was determinative of a person's worth and value. Moreover, skin color was reflective of social condition. To be other than white was to be oppressed, marginalized, and a victim of racial oppression, injustice, and exploitation. Color then was indicative of social class, status, and privilege. No one has an option to choose skin color. Skin color is an accident of birth. And in colonial societies, one was blessed with being in a class of power and privilege, or condemned to a class of powerlessness and inferiority based on the color of their skin. Sarah Ann Gill never allowed the color of her skin to determine the privileges and rights she enjoyed. On the contrary, she transcended the power divide such that she was a protector of the weak and victimized, and a protester against the social system that perpetuated the divide. In noting the times in which Sarah Ann Gill lived and the social implications of the color of her skin, my interest tonight is not in the history of those facts. Rather, my interest is in the facts of history. And here I want to make a distinction, to be clear. The history of facts has to do with interest in the record of dates, events, and personalities. But the facts of history have to do with coming to grips with life as lived under the rule of God. In other words, I'm a theologian, not a historian. The historians will be interested in records of dates and events and personalities. I am here to look at those events and dates and personalities, those history of facts, through the eyes of theology. And so I am making a distinction between the history of facts and the facts of history, staking my claim and my interest in the facts of history, which has to do with coming to grips with life as lived under the rule of God. Under the rule of God, the march of history and the destiny of nations are not left to boardrooms, military councils, parliaments, and senates. The facts of history push back against a religion abstracted from life. Religion becomes theory when removed from life. Religion is validated by what it does, not what it says. In essence, then, my interest is in the religion Sarah and Gill believed in and practiced, and that sustained her in the colonial times in which she lived. To realize this interest tonight in the religion that Sarah and Gill believed in and practiced, I'm going to do the following. Firstly, I will outline and assess the tenets of Methodism that reached Barbados in the 18th century, coming from England as it did. This outline is necessary, as at that time, the mainstream established church of Britain represented the dominant and elite plantocracy. Therefore, it endorsed the slave trade as an essential evil for providing free labor in the colonies, and thereby undergirded and supported the economic and political systems and development of the metropole. After John Wesley's Aldersgate experience, where he felt his heart strangely warmed, he was moved to start a movement which went against the tradition of the established church. This movement not only proclaimed the evangelical message of God's forgiving grace in Christ, wherever listeners would gather, but also in supporting the abolitionist movement for ending slavery in the colonies. Secondly, I will examine the practice of that Methodism with its social justice bent and interest in England in the Barbados colony. This examination is significant as in many respects the social conditions of slaves in the British West Indies colonies mirrored those of the poor in Britain. And some missionaries who came echoed the call for the end of enslaved servitude of the masses, while at the same time sharing the same evangelical message through the provision of services for education, healthcare, and skills development. Now, in each case, I will highlight the religious issues inherent in the facts of those events. In so doing, I will be able to locate Sarah Ann Gill in her times and context, making for a perspective of her life from the particularity and the peculiarity of her social location. Without an understanding of social location and theological analysis and critique of events at any given point in time, religion becomes meaningless. So what I've set myself to do then tonight is to examine Methodism as it was practiced in England and as it was brought to Barbados, or to the colonies in the West Indies, Barbados in particular tonight, and to see where the contradiction and the hypocrisies are. And while I do that, remember, as a theologian, I am interested in the facts of history, noting how life is lived under the rule of God. And so in each case, I'll be highlighting the religious issues out of those events. Hopefully we can finish before 10 o'clock. Now, I'm calling this section Methodism in England, England's cough, not the colonies' hold. In 16th and 17th century Europe, the church determined and controlled what one believed. Besides, it required the strictest obedience to its practices. On the one hand, it was held by Martin Luther, a German reformer of the 16th century, and his followers, that what was necessary for salvation was faith or justification. At the same time, John Calvin, a Swiss reformer also of the 16th century, and his followers held that it was a life of study and obedience to the Word of God, or holiness of life, or sanctification, that was needed for a right relationship with God. The sides taken then were concerned with what one believes justification as against how one lives sanctification. So it was law against grace, knowledge against faith. Now, within this contentious context, Methodists emphasize personal assurance of salvation by faith. That Methodist emphasis had to do with a personalizing of faith that worked itself out in social action. And so in practice, this faith reached out to the needs of the uprooted in search of work in the fast-developing industrial complexes and towns during the Industrial Revolution in Europe. The Industrial Revolution caused many persons to migrate to the industrial centers in search of work. People were uprooted by economic circumstances. In the process, their connection with the church was lost. The parish structure of the Church of England did not fit the needs of this worldly religion. The civil authorities and their collaborators would have practiced a religion for which God's rule and well-being were in the sweet by and by. This otherworldly religion, made for the practice and accommodating roles of religion in society and the adoption of a stance of servile obedience and escapism, a tinder of religion to which Sarah Ann Gill's politics of protest scratch match. Thirdly, you okay now? Thirdly, now, hers was a religion that had more to do with the affirmation of life than with the forgiveness of sins. Hers was a religion that had more to do with the affirmation of life than with the forgiveness of sin. Sarah Ann Gill lived in a society that denied worth and dignity to humans and saw humans as property. But by her politics of process that shunned a religion without ethics, rituals without righteousness, praise without practice, and Caesar instead of God, she held God's loving care on the cross in the death of Jesus as an act of solidarity with those who are excluded and oppressed. Now, as a good and faithful practicing Methodist, a religion that holds justification is by faith, she would have known that the forgiveness of sins is only one aspect of justification. More, the redemptive work of Jesus on the cross is also about God acting in solidarity with all of humanity. An act of God that thereby affirms humanity was the root and branch of Sarah and Gill's politics of protest. You might be happy to know that I've reached a conclusion here now. What I've said and done tonight, then, is that out of the inhumanity of the colonial times in which Sarah and Gill lived, out of the contradiction of the practice of the Christian faith between England and the colonies, and out of Sarah and Gill's resistance against inhumanity and attempts to deny Methodism a symbolic identity in the form of a chapel in the society, grounded in her politics of protest, I have drawn the conclusion. What is it? That religion, abstracted from its lived realities, is meaningless. So I've taken all that time to tell you one sentence. That religion, abstracted from its lived realities, is meaningless. Friends, we still live in societies in the Caribbean characterized by the patterns of thinking and living based on exploitation, discrimination, and oppression. Sarah Ann Gills are as needed today as she was in colonial times. Who are they? Where are they? Though Sarah Ann Gill is dead, it is not possible to bury a life exemplified by fearlessness, nonviolence, and incisiveness, all free of malice or any wish for revenge. Such was the nature of Sarah Ann Gill's forbearance and resistance. Sarah Ann Gill is dead, but she's not buried. Long live Sarah Ann Gill.
Ladies and gentlemen, Reverend Dr. Thomas has obliged to take some questions. So if you have a question that you would like him to answer for you, we ask that you will raise your hand and we will get a microphone to you so that everyone can hear your question. And I know that he will do his best to answer.
I just want to assure you, I said no such thing. I prefer comments to questions, so hopefully make comments.
We have a gentleman to the top. He has his question.
Good night. Thank you for such enlightening. I noticed that Sarah Ann Gill used, should I say, a social gospel in one way. And I'd like to ask you how far you think today that the church can go with a social gospel.
No, don't sit down, man. You ask me a question, and stand up to get the answer. When you say so far, what do you mean?
How far?
Yes, what do you mean by how far?
Can the church go?
Yes. I heard you. I want you to know I heard you. I just want you to tell me what you mean by so far. How far? Yeah. At my age, I have a little problem, but anyway.
Or should I say, how deep?
I still ask you the same question. What do you mean by deep?
Is that your way of evading the question there?
No, I'm invading your question. I'm engaging you.
No, there are those who would provide social amenities for certain persons. And then there are others who say, no. Let's say even the descendants of slaves that would be in need. And then the church would do its best in helping members and also people outside the church. Should they only go to those in the church or go outside also?
You have to go all over. I know what you want to ask me. I know what you want to ask me, but what you're actually saying to me, because you get that all the time. Can you ask me how far can the social gospel go? I think what you want to say and ask, in essence, is should we not be probably holding both in tension, meaning that you want salvation. I'm kind of chipping here because you want, persons normally come down on the side of you being saved, and meaning that it is all about praise, it's all about worship, it is all about your life in relationship with God. But your life in relationship with God, your salvation, it is not lived outside of a community, live within the context of a community. And that is why I've said earlier that justification has two sides. Justification means to be put in the right. God puts you in the right despite your sinfulness. But you're still in the world. You still have to live in the world. You still have to live out your life within the context of all the realities that you have around you. And may I say that at the last and in the end, you know what you ask? I was hungry, and what did you do? I was sick, and what did you do? I didn't see the question in there, are you born again? But so he asked you about that same social gospel that you're talking about. And that is important. But you see, that is going to come out of your relationship with God in Jesus Christ. Because, what sense it makes? Because I've said earlier on, you could be very virtuous. And for all your virtue, you're rebelling against God. All right? But you're virtuous. But you have, you don't business with prayer, you don't business with church, you don't business with God. But you're virtuous. Now, where's that going to take you? Might take you close up to St. Peter, and St. Peter might go left. But with that, so we need the social gospel. I think we need it. But if you ask me, as you heard with Dr. Edwards, since 40 years ago, we have been preaching Jesus saves, and we still believe Jesus saves. If you ask me tonight, Jesus saves, and I will sing that and say that for the next 40 years. But that life, that of being saved, has to be lived out within the context of the community or the society.
Good night, everybody. So we Bajans are discriminating folks. Every time I am
Yes,
lulled...
I said that?
I said that.
Who said so? That's why to be clear.
And every time I am lulled into thinking that we are not discerning, I hear lectures like tonight, so thank you.
You're welcome.
So Sarah Ann Gill exercised politics of protest.
Yes, ma'am.
And one of the questions that you asked tonight was, where are the Sarah Ann Gills? Who are they? I think there are many around. And I think that in the battle, the consistent battle between faith and analysis, each of us are Sarah Ann Gills. What I want to ask you a little bit of is, what are some of the values that in this ever-changing future that we're walking into, sometimes with blinders, what are some of the values that Sarah Ann Gill, in her example to us, would give us today?
You want to help me out with that? No, keep it in mind.
I don't speak
You
that well.
give me one and I'll give you another one.
Give you one?
Yes.
Resilience is one.
Good. I would say sensitivity to inhumanity, sensitivity to injustice.
I would say forthrightness.
I would say courage.
I
Okay,
would
we
say-
have to finish before 10 o'clock.
Yeah,
So,
I would say skillfulness.
skillfulness.
Yes.
As I said in the lecture, incisiveness. She was incisive.
Okay, here we go.
That was a good game, wasn't it? Yes. You could put that one on TV. Okay, thank you for your questions.
Do we have any more questions?
No.
We would like to thank Reverend Dr. Thomas, but before you go off the stage, Reverend Thomas. Before you leave, I would like to invite Mrs. Ashley Edwards, who will make a presentation to Dr. Thomas.
You see, you were running away from a gift. On behalf of the organizing committee and the audience here tonight, I want to present this gift to you as a token of our appreciation for what you gave us tonight.
Thank you very much. I think I said last time I came here up in Rices that every time I come to Barbados, I have a feeling that I receive more than I give. You know, but I am not ashamed of that at all. Because the Bible says it is more blessed to give than to receive. So thank you very much.